So, what is an insight? Well, an insight is the most overused and misunderstood word in marketing. It's the kind of word that people, if you say to them, do you use insights for what you do? They would say, I already do that. If you say, does this project have an insight? The answer would be, yes, it already has one. But if I took 20 people, put them separately, and asked them to give me the definition of an insight, I'd get 20 different definitions. So I think the first step in this module, and when we're looking at the block in the value proposition titled insight, is to at least define what that word is and what it is not. So, if we looked in a dictionary, the insight definition in a dictionary would be a discovery about something that was previously hidden. Why not ask Siri to define insight for you, or Google? You'll get something very, very similar. In Chinese, in Mandarin, someone wrote the symbols down for me, and the definition of insight is to come from the dark into the light. So it's like a revelation, but we've got to apply this in an innovation context. So it's got to be a revelation or discovery about the customer's problem or unmet need that the competition don't know and that the customer has never had relayed to them before. In fact, when we're thinking about it from the consumer or customer's point of view, if I give them an insight, their response should be, wow, that's fascinating. No one's ever said that before. That really is, though, my problem. And now you say it out loud, I'm wondering why no one's ever mentioned it before, because it's so obvious. A bad response to an insight would be, I don't care about that. Even now you've told me, it's so obscure and maybe it's not true and it's irrelevant. That would be a bad response. So when we're writing insights in this block, in a value proposition, we firstly got to understand that we're writing about the customer's or the consumer's unmet need, and we've got to be saying something that we as a business haven't said before or that the competition aren't already saying, which is easier said than done. So what is an insight then? Well, if I gave you a formula, it would be the 3 W's. W1 is what. What is the customer doing? So insights are built on observations. Then W2 is why. Why is the customer doing that? What is their underlying thinking, their motivation, or the behavior behind that action? If we don't have the why are they doing it, then we're only looking superficially at the problem, and we're seeing things that our competition can see. We're seeing things that everyone can see, and we're not digging into it. And the third W should be, as I described, and as the dictionary insists upon, which is the third W is wow. The customer's response or consumer's response should be, wow, no one has ever said that before, or no one has ever understood my problem to that degree in the past. So a few years ago, I went to see a team, a healthcare client of mine, and they said, we're working on an insight, and it is this. Women take twice as long to call for an ambulance after suffering a heart attack compared to men. And I said, okay, and what is the insight? And they said, no, we just told you. Women take twice as long to call for an ambulance after suffering a heart attack. And I said, but that's not an insight. And they said, yes, it is. It's true. Good. Well, then it's a fact. That's still not an insight. It's an observation. That's the first W in our list of 3. What is happening? Women are taking twice as long. And they said, oh, yeah, but it's obvious. Why? So I said, go on then, why? And then I got 5 or 6 different responses. Maybe they experience heart attacks physiologically different than men. Maybe they're not expecting to have a heart attack. Maybe they're worried about wasting somebody's time compared to men. I don't know. But if we don't know, then we don't know how to solve the problem, because we would solve that problem very differently based on those 3 different underlying causes. And the truth be known, maybe those causes are all true, they just segment differently. Maybe older women are more worried about wasting people's time. Maybe younger segments of women are less likely to be anticipating having a heart attack in the first place. So they could all be true insights, just against different segments of the target we picked in block number 1. So when we're writing our insight, we've got to be challenging ourselves. Am I explaining just an observation? About 95% of insights inside value propositions that I review on a yearly basis are simply facts or statistics. Next thing you want to be looking at is, am I single-minded? Have I got one problem or unmet need in my insight? If you've got bullet points in your insight, you know you've got a problem on your hands, because bullet points equal multiple problems. Multiple problems lead to multiple benefits, lead to an extended set of features in your reason to believe. So you will create problems for yourself through the rest of the value proposition if you do not focus yourself down to a single problem. Now, you might ask yourself, well, my customer has many problems. How do I do that? The truth is, no target will ever give you one issue if you ask what their problem is. They'll give you a list. If you said to me, I'm having a new child, what's your problem? I'll say, well, my need is I want them to be happy, and I want them to be healthy, and I want them to be well educated, and I want them to be sociable. And if you said, well, which one of those do you really want? I'd say, I want them all. The truth is, though, I'm going to have a priority based on my segment, and that's true of your target. Yes, I want lots of things solved, but I will have a priority order based on my attitude, based on my context and situation, and so will your customer. Your customer will want to have a reliable system, but they'll want to have an up-to-date system, and they'll want to have an easy transferable system. And if you push them to give you a priority, they will tell you which one you should solve first. So the insight is single-minded, and it is the priority of your customer. And if you don't know the answer to that initially, then the only way that you can, validate that would be to write multiple insights and then test them against each other with the customer and ask the customer to put them in a ranking of priority. That tells you as a business which solution you should focus on first. And then when it comes to writing insights, we need to write them in a standardized format as well. So when you're writing in this box, there are 3 paragraphs that you will write your insight in. Paragraph 1, situation. What is the customer currently doing? What is their context? What is their, current day-to-day activity? What are they doing as part of their business or part of their daily role? What are they trying to achieve? Okay. Then your second part is, what is their dilemma? So why can't they do that? What is the barrier or the trade-off or the compromise or the friction that is preventing them being able to do what they're trying to do? Because if we don't have a problem, we don't have the basis for a solution. I could say to you, well, I have an insight. It's just that, I like to go down to the grass at the bottom of my garden and watch the sun come up every morning. And if I said to you, what's wrong with that? You say, nothing, I have no problem. I'd say, good, carry on. I've got nothing to sell to you. I'm a manufacturer trying to sell solutions, and I find it much easier if you've got a barrier or a problem. If you're happy as it is, it's difficult for me to sell. So the main part of your insight, the middle paragraph, is the barrier or dilemma facing the customer. And then the third part of your insight is what we call the perfect situation. This is what they want to be able to do in a perfect world. Be very careful not to write a perfect solution. So don't say, what I really need is an embedded SIM that goes in a wearable device which allows me to pay for beer at festivals without carrying cash, because no consumer really says that. They're not asking you for a solution, a perfect solution, or even specifying what the answer would be. Much more likely they would say, what I want is a way that I can pay for stuff at a festival without needing to carry cash. What that is, whether it's an embedded SIM, whether it's a wearable, is for you to say in the later part of your value proposition, but the technology and the answer never occur in the insight. So what mistakes do people make when they're writing insights in value propositions that you could look out for when you're writing yours? Well, the first mistake, and the obvious one, is people write observations instead of insights. They write single data points. India has the fastest growing obesity problem in the world. That's not an insight. That's a statement of fact. It's an observation. So if you can't understand why that's happening, if there's no explanation of the motivation or the behavior, then you've made a mistake. It's not wrong, it's just not developed. And a good way of moving on from that would be to challenge yourself and say, but why is that happening? Use the 5 whys process that Design for Six Sigma uses to challenge yourself. Why? But why? And why is that happening? And, how can I understand that more deeply to get to the underlying cause? Okay, then the second mistake that people make when it comes to insights is that they have more than one problem going on at once. So if you have bullet points, if you have multiple issues, then you're going to generate what I call a Swiss Army knife value proposition, which is you're going to create something that tries to be all things to all people, solving all problems, and probably will solve all of those problems pretty badly. The final mistake that people make is to specify the solution in the insight. The insight is the question, it is not the answer. So if your insight says something like, what I really need is a fitness watch that contains a GPS module, as well as having a battery life that lasts for more than 5 days, you're pretty much specifying the solution rather than the problem. Or it might say something like, what I need is an in-house analyzer that allows me to test 7 things instead of 6. No, the way the insight should be written is, what I want is a way to test more things within my laboratory. Or what I want is a way to track my fitness and lifestyle, which is less complex and which fits better with my way of working, and so I don't have to carry any other devices with me. That's the same thing, except you're not specifying how the solution needs to be provided. And the good news there is, when we move on to the rest of the value proposition, you're providing your R&D colleagues with a lot more flexibility on how to answer the problem. If you answer the problem in the question, you're locking down the route in which your R&D team can provide you with a solution later.